Hi everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to do something a little different and we're going to go over a first impressions of the ONEXPLAYER 2 and do some brief comparisons against the Steam Deck. Alright, so first things first, let's talk about the ONEXPLAYER 2. It was sent to me for review by ONEXPLAYER. No money changed hands, and I actually had to pay some money to get it into the country, but I wanted to get you guys this review. To be clear, this will not be a thorough review, but more of a first look with some brief comparisons. I'm also doing this without any writing involved, and I'm just telling you my impressions as I got it a few weeks ago, and I've had some time to play with it now, so if I forget something, please forgive me. The device I was sent has a 6800U in it, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and a 512 gigabyte SSD. Starting with a very brief look at what the ONEXPLAYER is, it's a similar handheld console to the Steam Deck and many others that Neo or GPD have made over the years. This one is a little different though. While it runs the same Windows 11 experience many of these other ones do, including the new ROG Ally, it has these detachable controllers on the side. You just press the button and they snap right off. Unfortunately, you can't play with them off. They just don't do anything. They're incredibly light. I would be surprised if they even weighed 50 grams. They have no battery in them. They just have these contact points. Apparently you need an extra peripheral that connects two of these together like a controller and then connects to the ONEXPLAYER itself and acts over Bluetooth. But I wasn't sent that peripheral, so these detaching is pretty much useless to me. I can take them off and then use a Bluetooth controller, but I don't know why I ever would. That said, snapping them back on is pretty easy. You just put them in, same as always, click it down, just like a switch. The exterior is pretty nice. It's a nice softer touch plastic. The Joy-Con things, or the detachable controllers I should say, do wobble a little bit. So it's not a perfectly rigid device like the Steam Deck is. And they also have the half-depth Joy-Con analog sticks, which I really don't enjoy. There's not a lot of granularity to them. The D-pad itself is kind of mushy. It has a lot less click than the Steam Deck's does. I don't know if you can hear it, but that's me mashing it. It's a little mushy. It's not great, but the face buttons are fantastic. It has a intake, or two intakes on the back, and then exhaust on the top. And it also has a kickstand on the back, which is pretty nice. It's a little flimsy. It feels solid enough for the weight of the device. Speaking of the weight of the device, it's much more dense. Like I mentioned before, the controllers have almost no weight to them, which means that all of the weight is in the chassis, the center part of the device here, and it's heavy. It doesn't feel perfectly weighted like the Steam Deck does. It's close enough when you hold both controllers, but if you hold one controller, you can tell that it's very unbalanced. I/O is actually one point where this shines. It has a USB 3.2 Gen 2 on the top. It has a USB 3.2 Gen 1, I believe, on the top, like it's a USB-A. So that's already better than the Steam Deck's connectivity. And then if you look at the bottom, you actually have a USB 4. So this could allow an external GPU to work, which is really nice. It also has a micro SD card slot and a headphone port. So the connectivity on this is much better than what would be found on like the Steam Deck, for instance. It's also really beneficial that you have the USB 4. Unlike the ROG Ally, you can use any external GPU enclosure with this. You don't need to go with their proprietary $2,000 4090, for instance. And on top of that, you can use desktop-grade GPUs, unlike the ROG Ally, which is limited to their specialized mobile-grade GPUs. Other than that, we have a power button. We have two buttons which I swear were volume, but they actually act as extra buttons. You can rebind them apparently, but we'll come back to that later. And you have a auto or a turbo TDP button, which skips this thing from, I believe it's 15 watts to 25. Oh, and the display is 2560 by 1600, which is double the Steam Deck. That means this thing has a very sharp display, and the colors are pretty good too, so I have no complaints there. On the front of the device, other than the obvious inclusion of the controller buttons, we have a select button, another controller button, a start button, which is nice, a orange button here, which I believe is home. And then over here we have 2 extra buttons that control the device itself. The bottom one here, if you hold it for a few seconds, it'll toggle the lighting on and off. Speaking of lighting, I just turned it on, and here's the lighting. You can see that it has little strips of light here and behind both of the analog sticks. It's pretty nice, but as far as I can tell, it's only orange. It fits in with the aesthetic pretty well. I would have preferred backlit face buttons though. Analog sticks, I have no problem remembering where they are, so I don't know why they put light around those, but the face buttons themselves would be great. This top button here is supposed to be for the command center. We'll come back to that later. You can also hold that button to toggle between gamepad mode and input mode. Input mode allows you to use the left analog stick as a mouse and then use the face buttons as mouse buttons and things like that. Whereas controller mode acts like a controller, like a standard Xbox 360X input controller. While you're in input mode, if you click on the button again, just tap it, it will bring up an on-screen keyboard, which is pretty nice, but it's unfortunate that you need a separate button for that when there's just a hotkey in SteamOS that works anywhere, and you don't need to toggle out of a controller mode to do it. Onto the software experience, it's pretty much exactly as you'd expect from a Windows handheld device. It can play pretty much any game that runs on modern Windows, so forget something like DirectX 8 in most cases, those break all the time. But most modern AAA games will just boot, which is nice. Unfortunately, every other part of the OS suffers for it. You have to switch into the input mode and use the analog stick to click on anything. Obviously, you can use Steam Big Picture mode, but nothing in Windows is totally mouse or keyboard free, unfortunately, even in Steam Big Picture mode. So often, even if I'm doing something there, if a third-party launcher or something pops up, I'll have to swap over to the input mode, then move the mouse, then click on the play button or whatever, then hold the button again to switch back to the controller mode. That's not usually a problem, but sometimes in some games I notice that it'll actually map as a new controller in the game if you swap from controller mode to input and back to controller. What that means is essentially it'll read you as a player 2 and not a player 1, and for some reason that just makes the game fall over. In those cases, I've been able to fix it by detaching the side controllers and reattaching them, and then it'll recognize as the original player 1 controller again, but it's something that shouldn't need to be done. Aside from that, it's mostly a standard Windows 11 experience, with all the caveats and pros that you'd expect from Windows, with the one exception of the ONEXPLAYER software. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get it to work. I've used their old software, their new software, 5 or 6 versions of each. I downloaded those, I installed those, I did every troubleshooting step, even in their linked YouTube videos. I can't get them to work whatsoever. I looked through the event logs, I couldn't find anything. I tried everything that I could imagine. I tried updating the BIOS, which was a whole process unto itself. I tried a system restore. I tried reinstalling Windows. I've tried everything that I can imagine, and I haven't been able to figure it out. I did reach out to them, and they offered to remote into my device to try to troubleshoot it, but that's a very bad user experience, and since this is just a first impressions video, I want to give you my first impressions. I feel like you shouldn't need to reach out to support as soon as you get your brand new device because their proprietary software won't launch on the device it comes pre-installed on. So I didn't want to go through that whole process, just have it taint this review. I want to tell you guys exactly what it's like when you get it out of the box, and I haven't been able to get that software working. What that means is that I don't have any of the overlay features. In addition, I can press the turbo button, which is supposed to bring up the overlay, by the way, and it will swap to the higher TDP profile, but it's very dumb about it. It literally just changes the base TDP. Unfortunately, because of that, I can't really test a lot of the features. I mean, obviously it's a Windows machine, it'll run games just fine, but you won't have the fancy overlay or anything, and it's going to basically just be a random Windows laptop, but in your hand. Which you might like, that's fine, but it's not the integrated experience that I got with the Steam Deck, where I just booted it up, signed into my Steam account, and everything worked. On here, I had to manually go to Microsoft Edge, I had to download Firefox because I hate using Edge, I had to install Steam, I had to install everything manually. It wasn't just click and done. I had to use the mouse and keyboard to go to each site individually and download it all, just like a normal Windows computer. What that meant is that even though I can set up my Steam Deck in 10 or 15 minutes from a complete reinstall, this took about 3 hours between Windows updates installing all the programs I wanted, patching everything, fixing like the little annoyances like the centered taskbar I hate on Windows 11. It just took a long time. And when I finally got there, it was all right. Like it played games really well. It played games a little better than the Steam Deck in some cases, which you'd expect. But the user experience, the steps that it takes to get to that working state, is where I found issues with their choice of software on the device. Alright, so let's move on to performance. What can you expect? In Returnal, I had to set the resolution to 800p, use FSR and low settings in order to hit a fairly steady 30. That means that we weren't really able to use the gorgeous high-resolution display in-game, but that's just a side effect of the hardware that's in the ONEXPLAYER 2. The 6800U just can't push that many pixels in most games. What this came out to was about a 2 to 5% boost over the Steam Deck's performance at similar wattages. Where the ONEXPLAYER really shines, however, is putting on the turbo mode. That 27 watt draw is insane, and it will definitely get you a better performance. I was able to definitely maintain a solid 30 at medium-low settings at 800p using FSR, as opposed to just absolute lowest. The caveat to that is, of course, the battery life. This has a 65 watt-hour battery, which is about, 35–40% more than the Steam Deck, but it also can use almost double the TDP.
Hey everyone, Editing Kyle here. What I meant by this is that even though the ONEXPLAYER 2 has a 62.5% bigger battery, it also drains 86% more power in turbo mode, meaning that the battery life is slightly lower. The flip side to that, though, is that the 15 watt normal mode will last 62.5% longer than the Steam Deck, so there's a trade-off here. Alright, back to the video.
Unfortunately, all that TDP comes at a cost. This thing gets loud and like jet engine frequencies too. At full blast, this thing easily matches two Steam Decks next to each other running full tilt in volume. That makes sense since it's running at double the TDP, so you basically need to use headphones if you're going to play with this for any length of time. Also, if you sit in a room with somebody who's sensitive to fan noise, they're not going to enjoy you having this device. Another thing that I just thought of when I was running this Returnal benchmark here is I forgot that you can't actually adjust your volume without the software that they provide. Without the software, these will do like an Alt-Tab and a Control-Alt-Delete, but when you go back, it looks like this. It's just a quarter of your screen, and you can't really do anything about that. To actually adjust the volume, you have to Alt-Tab, go to the Windows bar down below, and then drag the slider manually, or adjust the master volume in-game. Obviously, this is incredibly annoying to deal with, so for each game I had to go into the volume mixer and adjust them each because each game has a slightly different volume, and it was a whole nightmare. That's more to say about Windows than the device, but because the device doesn't let you rebind these or come by default as volume, it's a ding on the device too. Getting into other performance, Horizon Zero Dawn had about a 7% boost over the Steam Deck using Cryo Utilities in my recommended settings, but only at the 27 watt mode. At the 15 watt mode, it was within spitting distance, maybe 1%. Elden Ring did see a sizable uplift, almost managing a solid 40, but I wasn't able to tune it to the same degree as on the Steam Deck, so the Steam Deck after Cryo Utilities and my recommended settings actually ran slightly better than the ONEXPLAYER 2. Obviously, this could be supplemented by installing a Linux distro on the ONEXPLAYER 2, but that's beyond the scope of this first look. Alright, so that leaves the question, where do I stand with the ONEXPLAYER 2? Well, let's start with what I like about it. The screen is amazing. It has a little more glare than I prefer, but it can downscale at an even integer to 800p, which makes it look functionally identical to the Steam Deck, and with better colors to boot. The battery life of the device is great. If you leave it at the 15 watt mode and you just play your games, then you get much better battery life than the Steam Deck. It has an extra 25 watt hours of battery after all. The I/O is phenomenal. It has a USB Type-A port, which the Steam Deck would never even dream of, a USB 3.2 that can charge it up to 65 watts, and on top of that, a USB 4, which allows for Thunderbolt docking. Thunderbolt alone is one of my big wishes for a Steam Deck 2, so seeing it here is awesome. I like the kickstand inclusion. It's nice to not need a third-party case in order to get that. And I didn't mention it much during the review, but I like the speakers too. They sound pretty good. They're down-firing, so they don't get to your ears quite as well as the Steam Deck, but the speakers themselves sound good. Now for the things I don't like. First of all, is the elephant in the room, is the price. The price of this, even on sale, is $1,100 US, compared to the Steam Deck's starting $400 for a couple percent sometimes improvement in games. That's a hard sell. You can install Windows on the Steam Deck and get a pretty alright experience, as good as a Windows experience can be, by default. So paying that extra $700 for a pretty thin performance boost is not the greatest value proposition. In addition, they charge you extra for things like the controllers being wireless, which I don't even know where they would sell that. I haven't been able to find it on their site. The second thing I really don't like is the software, or the lack thereof on mine. Like I said, I haven't been able to get it to work. I'm sure that their engineers would be able to get it to work. I'm sure that I'm missing something. But me, as a pretty tech-savvy guy who has maintained Windows and Linux computers alike for decades at this point, can't figure this out within 6 hours. It's pretty hard to recommend that as an out-of-the-box experience. Not having the ability to change volume in-game is massive, let alone being able to tune the TDP or anything else you might be able to do with the overlay. I haven't been able to use it, so I can't tell. The third thing that I don't like is the fan noise. It's very loud. It's disruptive. Like, I am fairly sensitive to fan noise, so I'll admit that. I would need headphones to play on this for any duration of time. It's that loud and that disruptive. And the last thing that I don't like, although this one is much more minor, is the height of the thumbsticks. I like full height thumbsticks, and these are just a little short. They feel like Joy-Con thumbsticks, which are just too small for me. But like I said, it's much more minor. So because this is a first look and not an exhaustive review, I'm not going to recommend whether you should buy this or not. I just wanted to put what I thought out there and the facts out there. At the end of the day, it's a fun device to tinker around with, and I will probably use it more for some weird off-label projects or something. But I'll personally be sticking with my Steam Deck for daily use. I can just pick it up and play a game without any fiddling. Alright everyone, thank you so much for watching this new form of content. Please let me know down below if you like this kind of thing. I just wanted to try something new. I haven't written anything. This was all completely off the top of my head. Just let me know if this feels right to you, if you prefer more in-depth stuff from me, anything. But thank you for watching this far into the video, and if you want to watch more of my content, something that's much better thought through or, curated, then I recommend going to watch my Hogwarts Legacy deck dive. It's really good, it shows off what the Steam Deck can do, and fun fact, pointed out to me by a Discord user, my presets on the Steam Deck actually perform better than the last gen consoles, which is amazing to me for a game that just came out. Alright, thank you all for watching, and have a great day.